Could You podcast. I'm Lauren Tocci.
And I'm Ryan Tocci. Welcome to PTI, boys and girls. In today's episode, we're discussing whether a Rocky sequel reboot can live up to the legacy 40 years later.
You know, I wasn't expecting Tony Kornheiser to make an appearance on our episode. Wait, is that the right name?
You did! Welcome.
Sports Ball! But I'm happy this is how we started on this film podcast.
ESPN just running in the background for you for the last 20 years.
You know, I didn't know that things
off.
Stuck in there, but they did.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. If this is your first time joining our podcast, we are two people who fell in love at a movie theater and never quite left. We started this podcast to fill gaps in our film knowledge. For me, that started with The Goonies. For you,
Raiders of the Lost Ark, Goodfellas, Friday the 13th, Godfather, Alien.
See, when you do that, you delegitimize our work. Because when you list them together, it's not great.
We've all known on this podcast I'm the fraud. I believe we started this entire show by you giving off your list of, resume and me just being like, I like movies.
I do appreciate the weekly tongue lashing you get from my brother where he's essentially like, do you even watch movies, bro?
Yes, he does come at me like that. This week was about Lethal Weapon, which I appreciate. You know, I do ask that maybe that it's not a family affair, so please don't judge me.
I will try my best not to.
I'm all here, though, talk about early 2000s, Dominique Swain, Rose McGowan films if you want.
There is a podcast for that. It's not this one. I love you so much. I'm validating and affirming your ideas. Maybe that's I don't know. There's the Ringer verse. Maybe this is the How Could You verse. And you do a Dominique Swain, Rose McGowan specific podcast.
I was giving you a good story this past week about my dad unknowingly putting on the trauma film Tromeo and Juliet and then just calling me up and be like, you watch weird stuff.
Just accurate. Nothing has changed. I'm going to ask, at the beginning of our podcast, we love doing a Tossi's Take, something we want to recommend to the audience. Can you recommend something non-weird to our audience?
Fair. How about I recommend something not to watch?
Okay, that's
Can
fair.
I go that
Yes, we can
route?
do that, yeah.
Listen, we're going to talk about Creed in such a positive way for the next hour to 4 hours, depending on how we're feeling. Listen, a couple years ago, there was a movie that I think I even did as a Tossi's Take as a recommendation called Host. It was a UK film that was shot over the pandemic, and they did such an amazing job. It was scary. It was an hour and 15 minutes, just really, really good movie. Well, with the success of that, those filmmakers got to, do another film called Dashcam for Shudder. Oh my God, just the complete opposite. One of the literally worst films I've ever seen. I hate saying that, but it's just the truth. There was not a redeemable aspect to this movie. And the biggest fault in it is their lead character, who you are sitting in and just watching, because it is a found footage film, is just so grating, so tiresome. There's not any moment that you're trying to find a positive thing to say about that character. And I apologize to the actress, because I don't know if it was a decision on her, the writing, but that is the biggest flaw with it. But it is so glaring, you can't get past it. And my PSA to everybody is, please skip that film. It is just that bad that I literally had to take the time on a Tossi's Take to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's hard for you and I to go negative. I think we love movies so much, and I think, you and I will pretty much endure everything. But this was one we were like, yeah, no, we have limits, and they have been...
I think we've got about an hour, and
yes,
I finally turned it off.
Yep, I agree. My Tossi's Takes is not a film. It's more of a moment. Or a movement, maybe. There's a store that I referenced recently. It's called Super Yaki Shop. So that's YAKI. You can find them on Instagram, and they sell really incredible movie merchandise that's for really niche audiences, I would say, or really niche fun things that you're I am really into that. If you've been watching our reels, you may have caught that I'm wearing a Guillermo del Toro t-shirt that is from this shop. But for a really long time, they have had this one bumper sticker that I really feel, and it says on it, "Hunk if you'd rather be watching the 1999 cinematic masterpiece, The Mummy, starring Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz." First off, there will one day be an episode about this movie. I guarantee it, because I love it truly and honestly, and had such the most massive crush on both Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz in that movie. It's awesome. I love it. But the really special thing about this is that on the BAFTA red carpet, someone gave Brendan Fraser the bumper sticker, and then he proceeded to carry it around and flash it around on the BAFTA red carpet.
It's amazing.
And if you're like, how is this a take? My take is I am really here for the wholesome content that's coming out of this, like, lead up to the Oscars. This Oscars race, this nominated class seems to be really just across the board having a really good time. And I'm here for the celebration of not just, like, the role that they're being highlighted for, but also these, like, incredible journeys. Like, if you think about an actress like Michelle Yeoh and, like, the incredible presence she's had, like, in Hollywood, someone like Brendan Fraser to have this really cool resurgence is fun. Keiki Kwan, like, of course, like, who has not been enjoying watching him embrace with Steven Spielberg at, like, every show. Oh, chef's kiss.
Brendan Fraser and him, just we're still here.
Yeah.
We're still here.
Stop.
It just hits. Just hits.
That Actors Roundtable, our friend Doug sent it to me on Instagram, and I was just like, ouch, my feelings.
Yeah.
They are still here. This is so, just so precious. I love it. But, stay tuned. We are going to be doing our full Oscars, conversation, our predictions for the show. That's going to be coming up, and we are bringing back Anthony DeSantis for that conversation. So we are super excited. But that's not what we're here to talk about today.
Super yucky excited?
I am always super yucky excited. And I know we are both very excited to talk about this film today. So this is a first for us. This is the first time doing a sequel. This is the first time certainly doing anything back-to-back that is so tied outside of, like, our Oscars episodes that we do year to year. And we felt really compelled to talk about the film Creed, and really to start this with what we would call our How Could You for this film. Not having not seen it, but how could you not think Creed isn't the best Rocky movie of the franchise?
We did put that out. We put it as our favorite fighting film on our reels. So, yeah, I think you're tipping your hand, I think, already of where we think it falls, huh?
Yeah, I don't mind saying it at the top, and here's why. Because this is one of those things. So the movie comes out in 2015. And I remember really thinking that at the time, but I am also someone who suffers pretty frequently from recency bias, where if it's, like, in front of me, so it's like I have, like, object permanence issues, like, I mean, like, I'm like a toddler, like, if it's in front of me, like, that's the thing I'm kind of obsessed with. And I think sometimes you and I can get overeager, overexcited about things, but I keep coming back to this. It's not this, like, fugitive thought in my mind. Like, it's something that feels pretty firm that, like, and I love the first Rocky. Like, this is not a knock on any of the other films, really. It's more just, like, there are several moments where I just kept writing in my notes, like, God, this is cool. Oh my God, that shot. Wow, what a film. Like, I felt like just as...
Coogler.
No. Absolutely not what you just did there. And I love puns. But I think that's probably a good space for us to start in. I think we had a lot of excitement, when this film was coming out, because we loved Coogler. So Ryan Coogler, who's the director of this film, we loved his directorial debut, Fruitvale Station. And the impact of that film is incredible. It's tough. It was something he made because, so if you don't know this, Ryan Coogler grew up in Oakland. He wrote and directed that film because he saw, like, a community racked with this trauma, this, like, intense moment, trying to sort through this. And that film is not an easy watch. If you don't know the concept of it, you are watching a young father on the last day of his life. He is murdered in a BART station by a police officer. It is not an easy watch. And this is based on a true story. And it's a film that carries a really particular heft with it. It's also, I think, any type of device when you're watching someone on the last day of their life. This is something that if you've ever read the Truman Capote novel, In Cold Blood, the whole entire first section is like this family who really was murdered, and it's about their last day alive. So you're watching this thing, and it's so, like, expertly crafted, and, like, for a directorial debut felt seasoned and with an incredible point of view and creative and fresh. And he just burst onto this scene as, like, this is new Hollywood. This is going to be the next wave of great American directors. And he feels like very much at the forefront of that because of that film.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely with you. Like you said, I mean, Fruitvale Station it's not an easy watch by any means, but you could see this just incredible craft throughout it and journey. And I think something with Coogler that is now with his 4 films, pretty different in some degree. Obviously, when we get to the 2 Black Panther films, you're talking about a sequel to, with Wakanda Forever. But, looking at 4 extremely, on their own type films, like, right, where it's not like he got, he's doing kind of the same type of thing. And I think that's really something sometimes we see with directors where it's like, oh, this is an amazing director, and then you kind of start to see the same type of influence in each film. And what's really unique and special about what Coogler has done here in his first 4 films, or really mainstream 4 films, is they're all their own. Like, he brings a personal touch to each one, which I think is the highlight of his films. Some of these are, Fruitvale Station is obviously a very trimmed down, personal, like, almost feels independent type film, whereas, where you look at, Creed and Black Panther, these are big, but especially when you get to Black Panther, these big budget films, but he still somehow finds this personal journey within them and this personal touch to them that makes them feel accessible and smaller in scale, but to a credit to it, which is really what I think is his specialty, right? Like, I mean, he also does some really unique stuff style-wise as well.
Oh, of course. But I totally affirm what you are saying here about this idea of, like, this ability to keep things, like, personal and localized, so that way when they have to go big, you feel the epic scale of it in a really, like, way in which that the payoff feels like, because something was so rooted and so personal. Like, I think about, that particular opening scene in, Black Panther with Sterling K. Brown and like the intimacy of that moment. And there's a lot of moments like that in Black Panther, but I feel like, or, one of my all-time favorite scenes in Black Panther is the scene with Killmonger in the museum. And the woman's explaining to him, this is the history of this. And he's like, no, the stuff is stolen.
Yeah.
And it's this incredible. And I think, like, the thing that Coogler has, like, hand over fist of kind of this next, like, this new generation of, like, Hollywood directors is that he has this, like, particular way that this dynamism and how his scenes are shot that, like, you're never bored, you're always visually engaged in the film. And I know that, like, may sound simplistic, but, like, you talk about, like, you said, like, a director who has taken on, like, very different narrative focuses in his films. Like, these are very, like, Fruitvale Station, Creed, and Black Panther are not the same.
Right.
Like, but, and there are definitely things that auteur aspect, you can tell it's a Coogler film, but not in the same way where it's like, you can't turn on a Wes Anderson movie and not know it's a Wes Anderson movie, like, because there's just such this way in which, like, all of those stories get kind of set in this particular way in which he constructs production design and pacing and, whereas with Coogler, I feel like his best assets are the way he makes heroic figures rooted in something so personal, the way in which I think he allows villainy not to be, like, anti-hero, which I think become the cliche, but to be layered. Like, it's not like he's trying to convince you not to think this person's villainous, like, obviously with Killmonger, but there's layers and there's purpose and there's, like, a little bit more, like, introspection into the psychology of that. Like,
well, Killmonger in Black Panther has now become the template for what everybody is looking for in a villain, right? In their films, because it's a villain that is grounded, that you can relate to, or to some degree, or understand, and it makes that journey and that fight, especially in the end, a lot more interesting. And I think when we hear about any of these now superhero films and they bring the villain, like, it all kind of goes, but we got Thanos, but Thanos, the real arc and the real portion of his character came after Killmonger, right?
Yeah.
So, like, and I think that's something, special that he really brought to especially to the MCU, which desperately needed it. And the other thing to really note about Coogler with these films is he wrote all 4. Yeah. So that also adds another layer of just, why we are kind of here, fangirling and fanboying over him and talking about how special he is as a filmmaker, because he's bringing both aspects of it and bringing, like we said, four to five unique, four unique, scripts. And especially what he did with Wakanda Forever,
right,
where he had the script written, had to literally throw it out, and then have the emotional weight of losing a friend that he had to somehow, honor and write into the script, and did it in just a really remarkable way, which I know we've already talked about. But I think he is, like you said, we've said it on the show before, we'll say it again, and we're going to talk so highly about Creed here over the next little time, but it's like he's got our money on opening night every time he puts something out.
Well, and I think this is like, and you talked about Fruitvale Station. Fruitvale Station feels like a directorial debut from someone who's got like a really well-developed voice and perspective of how he wants to tell story, but I think like that's when you then see with the subsequent films as someone who's like, it's not that he is... Because I wouldn't even say he's honing his style, because it was like so there at the base. I think it's more like he's playing around, he's experimenting. It doesn't feel tired. It doesn't feel... And I think like, Wakanda Forever, like obviously I am... actually, let me ask this. Of his 4 films that he directed, we're not talking about his short films, we're talking about only his features here. Which is your favorite of Coogler's films?
Well, Creed.
Yeah.
Creed might be a top 10 all time. It's my favorite sports movie of all time.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
No, it's great.
I'm not going to, just going to put it all out there while we're talking about it and not try to pretend at the end, like, oh, here's a surprise. I've only said all these, No, it is. And the more times I see it, the more special that film gets. It's not a movie that now every time I watch it, I go, oh, okay, you start to lose. It actually, to me, gets better every time. So I think it's something, and honestly, not to get too far ahead of our show, but like even talking about sequels, like Creed 2, which Coogler was not involved with other than producing, we see the difference. We see why this movie's special, and, we don't know what we're going to get out of Creed 3, but like, our friend John once said it to me, and it's so true after watching Creed 2, and how... I don't want to say bad, but like, how different it is from Creed 1 and how it felt more much sequel. Like where he had said, he's like, watching Creed 2 makes you realize how lucky we are to have Creed. Like, and it was really quite true. So, I got away there a little bit, but yes, Creed is by far my favorite, but that's not to take anything away from the rest of the other 3.
No, 100%. Mine's Black Panther. Like, I know you're looking at me like, I wonder, I think you would know that, though. Like,
of course.
And it's not, no, I love Creed. Like, I think, and I think this comparison thing, or why we're making this kind of proclamation of, like, is this the best Rocky movie? Is that, like, I grew up on all of the Rocky films, good, bad, and indifferent. When Balboa came out, I was very excited. I remember seeing that with my brother, and, the body kind of moving in the seat, because, like, there is just something about boxing films that feel, and there's like this kinetic energy. Your body just kind of has to move when you're watching a boxing film, or at least that's, I think, my reaction. I feel like that's probably your reaction too. Like, and then this comes out, and it just felt like as we talked about in our last episode, like the undeniable craft and the kind of like special magic that leads to Rocky. The film is beautiful. It's the best of the Rocky specific films, like from a filmmaking standpoint, like if you're just talking pound for pound, like shot composition and writing and pacing, that one feels like the best of the films. This is not to say any hate on the pacing of Rocky IV, which is like a consistent music video. Like, I mean, I love that, but there's something very special about Rocky. Yeah. And then Creed comes out, and it's like, there is so much packed into this story. I at one point said to you when we were watching it, oh my God, I forgot that he has cancer in this one.
Right.
Because like, it's amazing to me what Coogler does in this balance of developing all these characters, honoring the original, carving this new path, weaving within this story of like, like kind of like, what is it? How does it affect a fighter, an athlete in general, their backstory, their kind of like mythos, like, how much, this idea of like your personal identity versus your legacy, where help should come from. What does it mean to have like a coalition of people that are supposed to bring you up in this thing that they're very afraid for you to embark upon. Like, there's just so much that he does, and it's so visually interesting. I will still, all right, maybe Creed's my favorite of Coogler's. I just convinced myself. No, it's Black Panther. I love Black Panther because Black Panther is my favorite Marvel film. I make no, like, hidden claims for it to be something else. It's my favorite. It's just, I don't know. I think that's why it's so exciting to talk about this film. But one of the kind of through lines is as we talk about Coogler's work, and you're bringing up Creed 2, I think we are both very personally excited for Creed 3.
Very much so.
Because the absolutely marvelous Michael B. Jordan is at the helm as director. Jonathan Majors is in this movie. Someone is literally going to have smelling salts because I may just pass out during this movie. It's going to be another great chapter in Michael B. Jordan's story, which we've been following since Vince Howard and Friday Night Lights. And although there's a lot to be said about his career up to this point, I have a feeling we'll have many reasons to talk about Michael B. Jordan upcoming on this podcast. So let's finally get talking about this film. We open in a very different place than, the opening of Rocky, if we're going to compare this back. This begins in a juvenile detention facility.
Los Angeles, 1998.
Can I say one criticism? The caseworker doing too much.
You think so?
No, not like doing too much as a caseworker. Caseworkers are angels. It's more like doing too much acting. Like a lot of contemplative head nodding. You know what I mean? Like a lot of...
She went to the Joey Tribbiani School of Acting? Jay's good. I care about this kid. You know how it is. He's been kind of... You know what? That actress, steal your moment.
Yeah, well, but, we get this really kind of intimate space, and this is how we get, introduced to Adonis Johnson, through Mary Ann Creed, played by, the iconic Felicia Rashad.
Who replaces Sylvia Meals from Creed 2.
Is there a reason why she didn't come back?
She passed away.
Oh, that's so sad. Oh, I don't like that I asked now.
No, that's okay.
I feel bad.
You know what I feel bad about? I didn't realize that... I didn't remember Creed's wife in Rocky, and who was played by a different actress, Lavelle Roby. But then for Creed, then the rest of the films, it was played by Sylvia Meals.
Oh, okay. Well, this is a bummer space to begin in, but this is also
Well, I think it's important because I think unfortunately, most of us didn't understand why Felicia Rashad got recast when so many, other people had not been.
Yeah, where you're able to use so many original actors from the original films. It was always surprising when something gets switched around because it can feel like a little false or why did we do that? Or is the person not in the game? But that makes sense. I really like this opening sequence. You do get something very, and this is what, again, I think kind of highlighting what you and I were talking about Coogler and how he adds emotional resonance to every moment of the film. But, I like that Marianne says here, I hurt myself. I pushed family away. You are given immediately, this woman's life has been tragic ever since her husband died.
Of course, yeah.
And that's really tough. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to stay in it long. It's just it's a previously on Marianne Creed, things have been bad.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you can understand. A widow, and then, the strength that they give this character to take on and do this for Adonis is I think a really a sweet place that they put her.
Well, and I think also, too, because, clearly so much about, we understand about Adonis is that, he has anger, and he has reason to. He doesn't know who his father is, and doesn't really have a sense of, why he wasn't around. He says, I don't have a father. Yeah. And Marianne has to correct him.
We also find out at this point that he was not born so, I'm not saying women weaken knees. But there might be a reason the Drago fight went the way it did.
So you're saying because he had someone on the side, he deserved to get knocked out by Drago.
Just
putting
out there.
That's a hot take. I don't follow you, but I appreciate. Let's get out of this space. I'm upset. But no, I think there's this, immediate, I think one of the things you and I talked about with Rocky is there's obviously that Rocky has had hard knocks. He's essentially the muscle man for, someone in organized crime. know that his family's not around, but we don't know the circumstances of his family's, passing or how, like, what exactly happened. And so, like, I really appreciate Coogler's decision here to write origin immediately into this and not, like, vaguely hint at it. Like, the idea of, like, no, this is a kid who has seen hard times. He's lost his mom. He doesn't have a sense of who his father is. He's in a juvenile detention facility, probably because as a young man, he is working through a lot of really intensely hard things. And that has led to him taking that out in an aggressively violent way. You know, it's not like, certainly not trying to here to justify, but he's a young kid who's trying to figure a lot out. And then, you know, gets taken in by this woman who, you know, it's a really complicated relationship at the heart of this. I mean, she really has no reason to take him in, except that she knows that he deserves something better than what he has.
Yeah, honoring her husband despite his, you know, it begs the question, did she know that was kind of going on or not going on and that type of thing? But yeah, to take that on and, you know, honor her husband still and do the right thing is, you know, again, it just puts her in a really...
Well, it's a special place, right? Because I think one of the things that you see, and like, because there's so many questions that don't get answered, but I really appreciate that they don't. Like, why didn't Rocky know? Like, why did she never think that this was someone to engage with? And then you find out, like, well, like, Rocky hasn't seen her since the funeral. And it's like, why didn't you ever mend fences or try and, like, because then you think about, like, the difference in, like, mentorship he could have had, like, throughout his life or this other connection to his father.
Does the math work on this?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
I'm almost positive. Okay. Yeah. Well, so this is set in 2015. He is, because I think he's supposed to be like Rocky. He's getting to this a little older. Not as old as Rocky, but a little older.
I gotcha. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So you would, yeah, because I guess it would have made Adonis what, your age, so yeah.
Adonis is my age. So
if you want to take up boxing, you still have a...
Thank you. Mm-hmm. You know what? I've been looking for a hobby. I feel like my plate is not full enough.
I feel like our nephew Phoenix, he'll start training you.
He'll just look at me and shake his head and go, Aunt Lauren, no. And he's the most encouraging soul. Yes. But I think even he would go, just sit down, go read a book. But, you know, we come from this, like, and I love the kind of compressed nature of this opening origin story. I think it adds, like, a lot of weight to things we see later, particularly the most soul-crushing line throughout the Rocky franchise, which comes later in the film.
How about in the first key of, you know, fly, you know, I'm gonna fly now. Kicks in.
Chills.
Right.
Chills.
Yeah. And then a great Creed title card.
Yeah, and that, like, just that great lettering. Yeah. Little weathered, but, like, just so impactful. And then we're in Tijuana. That shot, there are so many, like, shots if we just, like, were doing, like, truly and honestly, like, just focusing on bit by bit of him in the chair, like, kind of off to the left of the screen with the diagonal slots, and he's wrapping his hands. How Coogler lights that moment is just, it feels, you see every curvature of his muscle, every little slight body movement because he's so well lit in this space. But you also get the sense of, like, the humble origins of the type of fighting that he's doing here. Like, these are not, his name, you know, is not something, like, he's not been trading on his father's name as of yet, which becomes, like, a theme through the movie, but essentially, like, the imagined reality of what he may have had if his father had survived, but versus where he is and how Coogler lights that particular moment to really get us to see Adonis in his adult form, just, like, so
yeah,
sharp.
And we get, you know, I'm a sucker for a tracking shot.
Oh,
so
you love tracking shots.
And the way they bookend this from the start here in the Tijuana fight to follow Creed to the ring alone, you know, by himself, kind of underground fighting, you know, obviously harkens back to what we see with Rocky in the original at the beginning, but then they follow him into the ring and keep us as the audience watching that through, and then obviously to bookend to where he gets to at the end. Just again, just really, you knew from that first scene to watching this visually, you knew you were in for something special, that this was not going to be a cash grab type film. Like, this is going to be, okay, you're giving this the due it deserves.
Well, yeah, because you're letting this character, and not that, like, Rocky does become central to his story. It's not that it does, but you're spending so much time just developing him. And, like, and what I love about the visual styling, too, of this Tijuana fight is, like, you immediately understand from the juxtaposition of this to his 9-to-5 job, like how inconsequential this fight is. It's not really helping him to forward this in a career way, although we know that is what his aspirations are. There's a great, thing that is done that kind of harkens back to the styling of the fight from Rocky's first fight in the first film, of like where the camera placement is.
Well, that cutoff, because what you're doing is you as the audience are following, and then it's almost like you are going to sit in your seat to sit and watch the fight. It's really,
Which is the same thing that's done as Rocky. And it's such a great move, because it's like, what it's making you understand is like their circumstances aren't the same, but these are like, his origin story is closer to Rocky's than his father's. And that's fascinating within itself.
I love the shot you have once he knocks out the opponent. And the opponent's in the forefront, where this is where you're focused, but you have Adonis sitting in the back, and he's already taking off his gloves as soon as the guy hits the canvas.
Yeah.
Pulling it off. I just thought that was a nice little touch that they add to it. It adds to this confidence of this guy, realizing that he's got something special. Because I think this movie also gives us, from an athletic standpoint, these... you born into athleticism, or do you train into it? And I think Creed kind of finds this balance of both.
Well, and I also think too, because like one of the things that comes up actually I'll pause on that, because I have a comment to that about like his kind of origin point. But like, we get to see him like in his like 9-to-5 corporate desk job. It seems like he is someone who has been pretty successful. He has just gotten a promotion. He has gotten an office. He is, by all rights, seemingly like on a trajectory to have this like really comfortable lifestyle, or even maybe a little better than comfortable lifestyle. I do have to know, what do you think the office atmosphere is like every time Donnie shows up to work? Like, he gets off the elevator. Are people just fainting left and right? Does time slow down? Do papers just like fall out of the copy machine? Like, I'm really curious, like, what you think that might be like.
You don't work a desk job, man. It is just tick, 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 tick.
But wouldn't the tick, tick, tick be more pleasant if Michael B. Jordan was sitting across from you?
Yes, that's right. The normal cubicle staring off is a little bit easier when Michael B. Jordan's sitting across from you.
Like, I'm just trying to picture that if like Michael B. Jordan just walked into my job. Like, I think I would stop. Like, I would freeze into place. I'd be lost for speech. It'd be...
That's cool. I'm not intimidated or worried at all.
All right.
Little worried about the next time I hear somebody getting hired at your district.
Oh my gosh, I swear I don't think I meant that to sound like as in need of Gatorade as it did, but like just... At this point, should we just talk about our favorite scene in the movie?
It's probably best. I feel more comfortable when we do.
Okay, so there is... listen, I think we could do this...
How many times... It's a drinking game of how many times we say this is our favorite shot of the movie or a moment of the movie.
Here's the thing. I am going to, for the rest of this, I will use verbiage like brilliant and amazing and awe-inspiring, but I will say I do think this is my favorate shot in film. I think it's yours too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really emotional, like, again, what they do is here you put you in the space of what Adonis is feeling and where he's at, and just something that Coogler does throughout this movie, which I think is probably the most really special aspect of trying to do a reboot, requel, sequel, whatever we call Creed, is that he pays so much homage to the original Rocky.
Or is it homage?
So much, without just feeling like this nostalgia jump. Like, it just blends so much into the story, and it's really... And this is another aspect of that, of just going, like... Of really the whole franchise, but, like, to have this moment, this YouTube video of, Adonis going down into the basement, and, we talk openly on this. We both have fathers that passed away, and it's like, it's hard not to connect in a film when you're watching a film of a character who's grieving their father and missing those moments and trying to navigate how you feel between, you know, kind of anger that they're not there and sadness that they're not there. And I think, you know, Coogler puts that on full display in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think well said and well pointed out. I also think, like, there's these interesting, like, layers to this of the, you know, so Adonis is, like, still in his corporate attire. He's in his mom's basement, or, like, this mother figure's basement, and it's this weird, it's quite literally a projection of, like, what he wants, and the fact that there's a projection screen involved with this. But so fascinating, like, he's shadowboxing in Rocky's position, not in Creed's position, not in Apollo's position. He's boxing his father. It's weird and fascinating that there's this choice made of this, like, body positioning that at times he's literally facing off against his dad. And I think it like emphasizes, like, because this is something that comes up in this next scene at the Delphi gym, where, like, he yells at little Duke, "Did you miss a meal?" And I think, like, there's this element of, like, you know, there's no denying that Adonis, by being adopted or being taken in by Mary Ann, that there's this element here of, like, well, you had comfort, you had privilege, you had access. But, like, I think, like, what little Duke, like, seems to neglect is, like, but he doesn't feel that. Like, at the heart of his origin story is a kid who lost his mother, ended up in juvenile detention facilities, didn't know his father. Like, for him, it's like, I am carrying around this trauma and this pain that is very real. And you may think that my life is comfortable, but it's not, because at the heart of me, I know myself to be a fighter.
Yeah. And I want to say something really quick, kind of speaking back to what I just said before. You know, you and I, obviously, I said we connect because of, you know, our father aspects of things, but that you don't need, obviously, don't wish that upon anybody, and you don't need that to connect with this. And I don't want that to sound in any way that I was thinking that, but also, like, I agree with you. You know, I think what the overall arch of this moment, which then plays throughout the whole film, is, like, kind of being in this, what do you do? How do you fight these feelings and these shadows that you have no real place to go with them? And it's that, you know, yeah, I mean, obviously we get to see it in a visual representation, but it's like, yeah, that shadow boxing, you know, of life and the things that kind of over top of you that you don't really know where to go with. Because yeah, like you talked about, like, this is a son that never met his father, but has this huge, you know, shadow that's over top of him because of it. And how do you handle that? Like, how do you honor this father that you don't know, while still recognizing, like, did he care about me? Did he love me? Would he have loved me? All of those things.
Well, and I think, too, like, what you're laying out here as well is, like, you know, what is more important, like, living up to a legacy or carving your own path. And I think it's why it's so impactful. He wants to fight under the name of Johnson and not under the name of Creed. And I think this is also, like, too, at the heart of what they do for Adonis is, you know, one thing that I think Coogler does not neglect throughout the film is you give us this, again, like I said, this compressed opening origin story, right? Where you see this young man desperately searching in his eyes. Like, you see that in his eyes. And then that gets carried through because, like, Adonis is, like, he's looking for mentorship. And, like, he has this incredible mother figure who has taken care of him and obviously nurtured him to be able to have this level of success. But this is, like, not enough. Like, he needs, you know, he's looking for this camaraderie or this, like, recognition within this realm that is both honoring his father but totally separate, like, and this, like, weird tie that happens there. And I think this is why, like, that Delphi gym sequence becomes so important to, like, pair with, like, Rocky, because, like, almost, like, I think in some ways almost what you want to say to everyone in this of, like, you all had an opportunity to make this kid feel a part instead of separate. Yeah. And this didn't happen. And it's no one's fault, but at the same time, it's had an effect. And now you guys got to kind of deal with the effects of that. And so I think that's, like, why when he shows up, there's this, like, when he shows up to Adrian's, when he finally moves to Philadelphia, there's this immediate, like, intensity of, like, does Rocky even understand the weight of this moment because he's not been building towards this, but like Adonis has in his mind. Like, it's just such an incredible thing. Like, an incredible arc to take a character
Yeah, you really... I like that you talked about the mentorship aspect of it, because we talked so much about that with Rocky, and, you know, that's something he's, you know, obviously seeking out the entire time in this film. You know, as we moved kind of to the Philadelphia... You know, I liked, you know, Mary Ann, before he leaves, you know, kind of gives him the... You know, you don't have to be him line, which I think, again, just speaks to so many of these, like... you know, punch you in the heart type moments, you know, it hits you right there. What's your thoughts on, or let me even say this, like, I love what Coogler does with Philadelphia in this movie.
Yes.
We talked a little bit about, like, not that, Rocky, it was a different time in Philly, right? And I think Coogler celebrates the city in this movie. It has its own side character aspect to it, right?
Well, and I think there's something that happens in the later Rocky films, like particularly in Rocky 2, like I think he understands that. I think what Coogler understands is that there's like part of being like within this neighborhood and he takes us around Philly a lot more. Like I think there's like with Rocky, it's really these like set pieces, and there is like Rocky's Philadelphia is very much there, but this is like, and I don't know if it's almost like, because we're seeing it how Adonis is seeing it, like an understanding, like he really celebrates, like, I think the spirit of what Philadelphia is and those neighborhoods, and kind of trying to capture the character of the city. Like I think by having like the motorbikes be like a huge component of like that like kind of final triumphant training moment, or like, you know, going around to like, well, this is the actual cheesesteak place you go to, or like, you know, showing that Mickey's is like sanitized now.
Right.
Like Mickey's isn't Mickey's. Mickey's got famous and is somewhat detached from the thing, like almost so that way, to the point that Rocky's like, you've got to train somewhere else. Like this isn't where you're going to become. Like you're going to train, you're going to learn, but you're not going to become anything from this. Like you almost need something that fits like where you are, or what would help you to grow in this particular way. And and I think in that way, like Coogler spends so much time celebrating that. Like you see, I forget the name of the club that we first see Bianca at. We get to see her at the Electric Factory. Like there's a lot more done, I think, with like showing living in Philadelphia as like a real part of like who Adonis is.
I did want to say, you talked about cheesesteaks.
Yes.
Something we did not talk about in the last episode.
That's true.
Rocky's a Pat's guy.
Exactly.
Rocky is
Right
a
on.
Pat's cheesesteak guy, and you know, we agree with Rocky.
It's a big old no to Geno's.
You know, I think I love the aspect that we get Adonis visit the Rocky statue.
Yeah.
Because now it's like you were talking about, like he's kind of dealing with the shadow of his father, but now he's going to look for mentorship in the next person that would, you know, be that, and has to come to a city that, you know, this person lives just as, you know, looms large, you know, is such a hero in the city, in the sport. And then he gets to go to Adrian's, which I think is a nice thing, because I'm glad Adrian's is still around. I agree with you. I like what they did with Mickey's, but I also think that like Coogler doesn't ignore any of the other films, more or less. Like, I think the only thing we can argue whether in all the franchises ever been ignored was how bad Rocky was in part 5.
But that's all of the other films ignored it too. So it's
but yeah, I love this conversation. I think they do. There is something really special in the chemistry of the entire film with the entire cast. What's your opinion on the chemistry between Stallone and Michael B. Jordan?
It's so heartening and it's electric. And I think like it was a reminder, and I know this was talked about a lot that year during the Oscars race, and certainly, you know, something you and I know talked about a lot. It was like, oh yeah, like Stallone can act. Like he's, you know, and not that he's not like, he doesn't serve like a really great purpose in action films. I'm not trying to say it pejoratively. It was just like, there's something that's done here of like, it's Rocky's sad in this movie. Like he has lost everyone. You know, it's not that he has a poor relationship with his son, but his son doesn't live in the country anymore. He's this mythic figure that is so important to this town, but past the point of being relevant and more in the, you're this mythic hero and still very special to Philly, but like there's just this sadness, and he carries this weight of being a widower, like throughout this film, like to the point that when, you know, he gets sick, he doesn't want to fight. He's watched it happen. He doesn't want to do this anymore. And I think like what ends up happening is like there's such this beautiful thing that occurs between them of like Rocky can't help being charmed by Adonis. Like he's like, I don't want to train you. I don't want, all right. Like I kind of can't help because, and I think that's like, because there's this immediate thing that Adonis like infuses into Rocky, which is this youth and this vitality. And I also think that like Adonis is very troubled, very traumatized, but he's not hard. There's something kind and open about him, something super determined and tough mentally and physically, but he's also like a kind soul. And I think like Rocky needs that sweetness in his life. He needs someone to remind him that like there's a reason to keep pushing forward, and like the ghosts that you're carrying aren't the only way that you could continue to live your life, that you could have something new. And like, I don't know, I think, and in that particular like scene with him and Adrian's, when he says like, I've been fighting my whole life. Like, like you don't understand what my life has been like. But I also think that there's probably something within Rocky's origin story that can understand that too, that can recognize like, oh, you've not had it easy either, kid.
Yeah, I think he sees everything. You know, I like the writing in this scene to me is really some of the best of the entire film, only because it builds so much to where we go from there. And, you know, just that line of, you know, Adonis, who again is trying to understand all of this and now is meeting this person that looks at his dad in such a high regard and he says to him, well, almost this hero moment of like having to say like, well, he went out probably how he wanted, and Rocky just turning to him and going, "Yeah, I think he'd rather be here with you."
Yeah,
is you know, again, it really speaks to the writing, and so we understand the space that both of them are in. You know, because like you said, I think Rocky at this point is just living out his days, right?
Exactly.
He's waiting to be with the people that he loves again.
Yeah.
In what form that is.
But he's and that the hard thing is like you're too young to be that resigned. And
Yeah.
I think that's what Creed does, goes like, you don't have to resign to this kind of life.
Right.
Like, you have reasons to, and it's nothing against like the character of his son, but it's like the distance there is not helping him with the day to day. And I think this is like another way in which Coogler does, like he allows I don't think Coogler shies away from showing Rocky with an emotional vulnerability that feels advanced at this point in his age. Like, it's not like Rocky in many ways, like from that first movie, is an emotionally vulnerable figure. But I think like what Coogler does is he's like, no, let's be realistic about how he would be. Let's say, honestly, if you had lived through what Rocky had lived through, how would you be as a person? Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's still kind and he's benevolent and affable, but like he's also really sad, like all of the time. And, you know, and I think it's important to show that too, because I think there is a discussion then around like depression and loss that becomes like really important in this movie and like what that can potentially mean. So it's like a really, I don't know, Coogler's just a genius. And like we could sit in Adrian's for the next like 3 hours and not talk enough.
Couple of really quick things I have with this before we move forward.
Yeah.
First question, Adrian's. Does somebody need to create an Adrian's in Philadelphia?
Yes, we would go all the time.
Yeah.
Every time we're in Philly, I just go have a meatball.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Come on.
2, do you agree with your brother that Gazzo probably is helping to, you know, be the silent partner at Adrian's?
It actually makes me so happy, and here's why. Because I'm like, don't just drop this like very rich character that you make in the first film. I want to know what happened to Gazzo. I know I shouldn't be like emotionally attached to him, and it's not like that. I just kind of want to know it. Like, I hope his driver like slept with the fishes as the Partlands was, but I also kind of hope that Gazzo's still kicking around.
All right, and then my final question is a legitimate question. They ask about the third fight.
Yeah.
Rocky gives a definitive answer. Yeah. Is it the truthful answer?
I think he's lying.
Do you think he's lying?
Yeah, I do.
All right.
I think it's or it's not. Or I think maybe is Rocky admitting something there again that is an emotional vulnerability that I think Coogler's willing to do, of like, yeah, Apollo was the better fighter. Like, this is not even a question. Like, Rocky's like, I'm not as talented as him, guys. Like, I have heart, but I'm not talented.
Well, we get that great line of, you know, what is it? Time takes everybody out. Time is undefeated. I mean, it's...
Yeah. Well, and then I think this is like, you know, in the setup, I obviously there's a lot more we're talking about this like particular relationship, but I think this like emotional foundation is so important because then it carries, and I think it makes everything feel so much more intense and powerful the rest of the film, because he had this like very quiet scene just between the two of them, divorced from the training, just a really like like heart-to-heart conversation as they try and feel their way through what this relationship potentially could be. And I think this is why it's like, so we then get like the breath of fresh air that is Tessa Thompson as Bianca in this movie not long after this.
I can't wait to discuss all things Tessa Thompson.
True.
However, I do just
Ryan Tocci wakes up in the morning, wonder how Tessa Thompson's doing.
Hoping, maybe at a cubicle one day.
Ryan Tocci, if Tessa Thompson walks into your office, like I will come flying from work. I will abandon my students if Tessa Thompson comes walking in your work.
I'm here to teach Tessa Thompson the ways of fraud disputes on debit cards. But before that happens...
Can you please change your Instagram bio to say that? Just for a little bit.
I might do that. But I do want to talk about something I love. It's something I don't think Coogler certainly didn't invent this. This is something that we've seen in other films. But what I'm really happy they bring into this is this decision to do things that, we see in regular, like the HBO's 24/7
yes.
on the Conlon Wheeler fight. Mm-hmm. And that sets us up with knowing who Conlon is and Wheeler, who we met earlier. But I thought I love that. That gets me pumped up. I miss HBO sports and HBO boxing especially.
Be honest, you miss Liev Schreiber's narrative.
Yeah,
stylings.
At least we get Liev with, Hard Knocks still, I believe.
Yes.
But, I do. Like, Liev Schreiber getting, cameo in this with his sweet, sweet voice.
Oh my gosh, remember the one we watched about Canelo?
Yeah.
And, we were, on that.
Well, yeah, we used to watch all of them. I mean, we
they're
were
great.
Yeah.
And they're so well produced. And what I appreciate, I agree with you, this kind of thing. It's also, it's kind of like the, inclusion of ESPN, later on for, with PTI is, these things would be talked about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it makes sense, and I like that you get pretty Ricky Conlon's, introduction this way at this, distance, in a manner of speaking. It's kind of, a cool way to do it.
Yeah, it just gives you that base of reality that you can sit in, which I think is cool.
Okay.
Now, let's talk about my favorite deposit operations banker,
Future.
Tessa Thompson. Future
deposit. She's just incredible. So we were very, very fortunate. We saw her in a play called Smart People, right before she kind of hit big. And she is such an incredible force in this. One, I love the commitment to honor the tradition of Rocky and have a really beautiful love story. That makes me super, super happy. I love their introduction to each other. I love that she's playing this incredibly loud music, and then you find out why later on, why she kind of needs it. I also, Tessa Thompson embodies this incredible light and spirit all throughout this movie of being the kind of love interest. I think one of the reasons why the love interest story in the original Rocky feels so compelling and heartwarming is that it's not without conflict, but it's devoid of the normal beats of conflict. Whereas to me, this feels kind of more like that. It's not the reason she gets mad at him later on in the movie is totally reasonable. And anyone would be pissed at someone for doing that and ruining this opportunity. But I just love her entrance. If you don't know this about the film, which I'm sure if you're listening to this, you already do, Tessa Thompson did write and produce the music that Bianca is singing because Tessa Thompson, including being just insanely talented actress, is also a very talented musician. And I also think that adds a level of authenticity to and not that another actress couldn't have done this, but I think it just adds something to it that it is actually her music. So it just makes it kind of special.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the love story here doesn't feel just tacked on. It really enhances the entire story. It's its own little navigation of this story on its own, I would sit there and have watched just a romance about them because, like you said, there's, again, we talked about the chemistry between Stallone and Michael B. Jordan. The chemistry between Tessa Thompson and Michael B. Jordan is so real and so beautiful. Probably the best part about Creed 2 is probably still the Bianca stuff. The Bianca character is so well written, and nothing against Adrian. She's a great character. It's a great love story, but they give some more layers to Bianca. And that was really something that Coogler and Tessa Thompson came together to really sit down and flesh out, because they wanted Bianca to be a character that had her own hopes and dreams, that weren't being derailed, that she was fighting her own fights. She was going through her own stuff while still being there to support someone that she loves, and I think that was such an important decision for both of Coogler and Tessa Thompson to have the Bianca character, and it shows in this movie. It's not just something that you hear about and then you don't see it on film. This really plays out throughout.
No, and I think that's well said by you, because there is she's much more of she's more of a woman of agency, and I think that's the other thing too is I think she's able to hold Adonis to a line that, or as she refers to him, she calls him Donnie throughout the movie. I think she's able to hold him to something that gives him kind of a tether back to some reality or some focal point. I think she challenges him. She's not. And, and this is the thing with, the character of Adonis. He is immediately charming and endearing. But she doesn't act easily won by him. She enters into this kind of slowly, I wouldn't even say, cautiously, but she's trying to get to, a sense of who he is. I love, how they have her find out that, when she's like, your uncle's Rocky? How did you not, of course I'm from Philadelphia. Of course I know who Rocky is. She's so incredibly charming. And I think, there's, when she's singing at, I remember the club name, it's called Johnny Brenda's, when she has that, it's just, she's so charming and magnetic. And I think, there's also this really cool thing that you get to have is they're both up and coming performers, really, because it is so much about persona. So I don't know. I think her entrance into this is great. I have to ask you, and taking us back a little bit to the boxing, what do you feel about the essentially the title cards to announce the fighters in the film? Do you like this? Don't like this? What's your feelings on this? 'Cause I know we've talked about the bringing in the kind of textual elements of 24/7 and PTI. Do you like that this kind of breaks and that you get these title cards for the fighters?
The Suicide Squad titles.
Yeah.
No, I think it's. To me, this is a perfect film. It truly is. And even up to those moments. And I can understand where some people wouldn't like it. To me, what it does is it catches you. Those quick moments allow you to quickly understand who this person is, why they're important, what we need to know about them for however brief or long they are on the screen.
Sure.
And that's why, going back all the way to the Wheeler moment that we get back in Los Angeles before he comes out is so important. So we know where Conlon is compared to Wheeler, to what Wheeler did to Donnie, to allow him, so it's just, yes, I think it really adds something while also giving you that boxing, type of tail of the tape.
Yeah. Well, and I think the thing is you reference Suicide Squad. I've seen movies do this in a really lazy way because they don't want to write character. I don't think that's what's happening here. It just feels like it adds another depth or another way in which the pacing of the story goes. And it's these quick kind of grab moments of okay, this is who this person is. All right, moving on back to Donnie's story because that's really where you're supposed to focus. One of the things I also really like that Coogler does in this film, as I'm sure we'll talk about with Pretty Ricky Conlon, is that, and it's a similar thing that's done in Rocky, is there's not these fighters are adversaries, but they're not villains. Nothing against Drago. Drago is billed to be a terrible human being. And then not, I don't know. It's complicated. We'll maybe do a Rocky 4 episode sometime. Who knows?
Absolutely.
But I also think he does that nice thing of their opponents, and he gives them kind of clear personalities. But I will say, I do think there's one villain in this movie, and it's one Mr. Pete Sperino. I hate Pete Sperino so much.
Why?
Because he does some shady nonsense. He is out there in those streets being that's Creed's kid. That's not cool. Rocky asked him for a personal GD favor, and he couldn't hold that. Once his kid got hurt and laid on him, and now all of a sudden he's like, oh, by the way, I've got a secret. So angry.
I don't disagree with you, and you are right. However, I think he just reminds me of, wrestling dads. He just reminds me of
1,000%.
Here's a guy. All he wants is he just thinks the world of Rocky. All he wants for his kid is to have the best for him. And when Rocky just totally brushes him aside, he's hurt, right? He's just a man that's hurt, and his poor kid just got knocked the F out.
And I think to me it starts earlier, because I think it's he's a clout chaser, and he's going after Rocky because he wants Rocky back at Mick's, but it's but Mickey's doesn't look like it did. And also too, let's be honest, Rocky's origin story at Mickey's does help to develop this trajectory of being an underdog. That's kind of what Adonis is. Adonis can't train in such a sterilized place, and Sperino's walking around acting like he built Mickey's, and it's super annoying. And then and just how he is with Rocky is I don't know.
Rocky unintentionally plays him.
He does.
Unintentionally plays him. Rocky has to keep the secret, but yeah, I mean, this guy doesn't know that, his kid, he thinks he's getting his kid an easy fight, and here he sees Apollo Creed's son.
But not with a lot of training, Apollo Creed's son. I don't know. I just find his character really annoying, and I don't find any of the fighters that odorous, but him I do.
It's like the schoolyard kids picking football and being one of the Manning grandkids is the all-time quarterback or something. I don't know.
Yeah, he just, and there's just way. I will say this is a shout out very quickly to the costume designer of this film. One of the things I really like, and this kind of starts within the sequence, is there's a really nice update to Rocky's look. It's still, so obviously that iconic gray sweatshirt or gray sweaters, gray turtlenecks, and black jacket and fedora. And there would be a version of this where he's kind of keeping that same outfit, but what they did instead I thought was really interesting is they kept the same color scheme, but they went with softer fabrics. It's a canvas black jacket. It's the sweater underneath looks softer materials. It's just they've kind of aged up what his look would be. He still wants to look like Rocky, but he's not. It's not that same I don't know. Everything about Rocky's look in the original, it feels very 1976, but this muted, and it's very iconic, and it's he still dresses similarly, but all the fabrics have been made softer because he's older now.
You're really right.
It's just a smart decision, and I feel you first see this really highlighted, particularly in that entrance to Mickey's.
So let's talk about now. He takes the fight. He accepts the fight. Now we already have talked about how that fight goes, but I think it's important to talk about. This is the moment where they start to really decide to come together and train. Quick question: do you think does Rocky take on Adonis, or at this point, I think in the movie we're calling him Donnie? Do you think he takes on him because of obligation? Because he sees something? What reason do you think Rocky chooses to take him on after, is it something that Rocky needs? What is the reasoning?
I think he falls in love with him. Mm-hmm. I think there's such a spirit of, and I think all that gets packed into it, doesn't it? There's this obligation, there's this tradition. I also think there's probably an element of him that's that kid could be a great fighter. Yeah. Under the right circumstances, and I wonder if it's all of that. And I think it's also a spirit of wanting to help. That's the thing is at the core of it, the story of Rocky is about a guy who wants to help people and wants to be something more. And I think he sees this as his next something more. And, the guy's living life at half measure. So would this kind of supplant? But I think it's really altruistic. And I think there's this element of, you and I are very fortunate to have family or friends who feel like family. Mm-hmm. And I think there's that recognition there too of this is having Creed again. And don't I immediately feel this familial tie to this kid? I don't know. I think it's all of it.
Yeah. I love we get the introduction of the team. We get our cut man and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And, I think the scene, a couple of the things we have to talk about most are just the looking in the mirror, right? One of the more iconic moments of this entire film of just, your toughest opponent, like this is your toughest opponent in front of you in life and in boxing, right? And looking in the mirror and him talking about the throw a punch and that person looking back at you is throwing you a punch back and you have to defend. And, I think it's a nice moment of just breaking down sports and life of going like, yeah, at the end of the day, this is all just about what you're doing for yourself and how you're handling life's adversities and fighting off. And it's a really, really beautiful moment of, that everybody can kind of see and understand.
Well, and I think that's like so well phrased because like, honestly, when I think for the first few times I saw this, I thought like, oh, this is like a really great metaphor. But like this time, for whatever reason, when I was watching it, I'm like, oh no, I actually see what he's teaching him. There is like an element of like technique in this. It's like this great metaphor and this like awesome technique. And I love too, like, cause you have within this, like once he's training at the French Street Gym, like Rocky says, Philly fighters are the toughest fighters in the world. And it's like, that's the spirit of Philly. Like, that's what it is. Like, there's something fierceness within like the soul of like people who live in Philadelphia that like makes them like kind of special and different in that way, but it also comes from like this intense hardship and you get the sense that like, when when Donnie is in this space, that it's like very much like he is physically gifted, but he does not have technique. And this is what they're teaching. Like they're getting him to be technical. And I agree with you. That mirror image is such a beautiful, beautifully shot sequence.
And then obviously the, one punch at one step at a time, one punch at a time, one round at a time, one step at a time,
that repetition's so great.
Yeah, I was giving that just recently to our nephew and talking about, going into his postseason wrestling. And I think it's another thing that can be used, but, again, it's that we need that Rocky montage moment, and Coogler delivers. He gives you these special dialogue, this inspirational moments of training. Like I think, and I like that. It doesn't take Adonis like forever. Like Rocky's original montage is kind of like, oh, is Rocky gonna be able to do this?
Yeah.
Adonis, he just needs somebody to hone his skills. It's like he says, like, every punch I've ever thrown was on my own.
Yeah.
Like, now he has somebody that's mentoring him and getting him through.
Well, and I think also Rocky, doesn't take it easy on him. He says, that bell means hell, and he's gonna push him to this, particular limit. And I think that's, what's cool about it, too, is, you do get to see him struggle a little bit, but I agree with you, it's, not the same kind of struggle as, Rocky's, because, you do kind of believe, Adonis is going to be fine, but, it's, I do think there's, there's such, great, work done in here in terms of, how this is shot and how it's angled, even when they're doing, I don't know, what do you call that, high bag, the thing that's,
Speed bag.
Speed bag.
Yeah.
When they're doing the speed bag and he's teaching him the pacing of it and the camera is at a diagonal point of them to make and how they're framed right there, to add it almost because of the shot composition, it makes Adonis seem a little larger and almost quite literally Rocky's on his shoulder showing him how to do it. It's just a really cool
little
scene.
Angel on your shoulder. That's a Rocky 5 reference.
Stop it, we're talking about Creed. And this, so throughout the film, and the nice thing that I think Coogler does is he, plays back and forth with the various storylines in a really nicely balanced way. So that way they always feel like they're equitably being developed. I think I love the sequence in Bianca's apartment, as their relationship is developing. There's that beautiful shot of them on the floor.
Yeah.
And they're listening to the music. And the colors are so beautiful, and there's this great sunlight coming in, which just feels in such contrast to the Main Street Gym, which the color, toning and that is so different because of the atmosphere. And they're just so he films them upside down, and they're just facing each other. Oh, it's such a beautiful shot.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to take the time to do this.
No.
I'm so glad he does.
No, but I think he finds the moments to quiet the film down, to tone, to put us in that space. Also, just when you talked a little earlier about the soundtrack, something Coogler, all his films have are these just brilliant amazing soundtracks, and obviously Creed is no exception. A soundtrack that lives up to the original, but feels completely fitting for, this film.
Well, and as well, I'm going to hold on to that because there's a particular musical cue moment that's like very, very choice at the end.
I do want to say also, something I should have mentioned before, and you talked about with the costuming, and something I just want to, kind of also, the choice on what they do with Adonis's, especially his training outfits, right? To give you this modern Nike, version of Rocky's original outfit. Yeah. Really cool.
Because it's like awesome because it's the same tones and same look, but not.
Right, right.
It's so much like...
And good, because we do know that, Donnie, he is somebody from means because of Marianne taking him in, so he should have all that Nike amazing gear on him. I'm sure the sponsorship for the film helped as well, but...
I'm going to go out and get a Nike Grease sweatshirt, if I'm being honest. I do also, another note of costume designing, Rocky Balboa's commitment to still rocking Chucks throughout his life is just...
Listen, the man literally, again, greatest fictional, sports figure in a town of all time, because, those who have not been to Philly, there is literally a spot on the steps that is a piece of concrete that has Rocky and the footsteps of the Chucks. So, yeah, Rocky had to wear Chucks in this.
City of Philadelphia, sponsored by Converse.
Right.
So this takes us to, we get to the Leo Sperino fight. And I know we've talked a little bit about the, the outcome of it, but I also want to really highlight one of the things that Coogler does in such a incredibly brilliant way throughout this film is every fight sequence feels different, because he, I think, shoots them in a way and lights them in a way so that when you get to the final bout, it feels the weight of this is a class act fight. And not that this one isn't, but the interior pacing of this is so incredible. How that camera shifts and moves within that ring when he's fighting Leo Sperino is just chef's kiss.
Yeah, because I like when we have the pre-fight stuff, because I think that gives a nice moment to Bianca, where we see Bianca now being pulled into this world and her nervousness and trying to learn this life.
She looks so really, tweaked out. Yeah.
I like Donnie's, having to go to the bathroom because, again, I don't mean to, anybody that's ever done something nerve-wracking or, athletic or whatever nerve-wracking has had that feeling
of I'm nervous, I need to go potty right now.
I have a legitimate, I apologize if this story is a little crass, but I apologize. So when I ran in high school, I was so excited. I made the I qualified for districts, and I had to run the mile, and I did awful. And it was, I remember telling my friend after, I'm because I had to
oh no,
and I was it's so hurt and thing, and I just ran awful, just pathetically awful.
So what
to
you're
the point
saying
is that friend still to this day will just every so often randomly send me, hey, don't you still have another lap to do in that race? Mocking me about it. But and the whole thing comes back to, you know what?
Cut the gloves.
Cut the gloves and go do your business.
I never thought our podcast would ascend to these heights, but here we are. Look at us.
Hey, look at us.
Look at us.
But yes, going back to the really what we should be talking about is, that fight. I mean, and those who don't know, this is a 2-round fight, uncut scene. I mean, the artistry, the talent by everybody involved to make that work is something incredibly just they did have to shoot it a couple times because it didn't work all the way through all the times, but the fact there is not a cut in that, that is not movie magic where you just don't see it or something like that. That is literally 2 rounds of boxing filmed that is, like you said, floating around this ring and just putting us as an audience all the way through. The decision to do that, and then the ability and skill to be able to pull that off and make it look as amazing as it is. I mean, just... And
then, also, too, and it doesn't, lose the celebration of the moment, because I think this is, the thing of, Rocky's, like triumphs within the original film, like feel great because there's like a triumph of spirit, but like we don't really see him win. Like, yeah, I mean, like we see him win a fight, but it feels like a low card fight. Like, doesn't feel like that big of a deal. Like, this feels like a big deal. So we get to have that moment. And then I love the yelling out of we got one.
We got one.
And then him turning to Bianca and going, I'm a square though. Like, because like a callback to earlier where she's like kind of saying like,
right.
Because like Bianca it's like kind of has like this like real essence of cool about her as a performer, and she does kind of, I think, like give him, I think she carries like this persona of like being from Philly and being a performer and being out at these spaces, and I think that's why it's so important that Coogler is particular about showing like Bianca's Philadelphia, like not just Rocky's Philadelphia, but Bianca's Philadelphia, and where she wants to go. And so I think it's this really sweet moment of, I think, her having to reconcile he is good at this. Oh my gosh. This, not that she doesn't believe in him, but she's having, as you so aptly put it, she's having to enter this world for the first time. So I just love the playfulness of that moment.
Yeah.
Because you could just go right back in and honestly, the next beat of the film is not fun. So it's nice that we get to have this, because very soon after, this is when Rocky gets sick. And
yes,
and
this is something that why Stallone turned this film down.
Oh, well.
He did not want to do this. So, they brought it to him, and he just did not think it was the right story arc for Rocky. We talked a lot about in the last episode about the Rocky legacy and what it meant to Stallone, and where he could not, as he put it, he couldn't see it. He didn't see that this was the right thing for Rocky, and didn't want to leave it where, with that. However, two things, again, changed Stallone's mind. One is the fact that this Rocky storyline is based on Coogler's real dad, and his dad had a mystery illness and his fight through it. So that is where the Rocky, storyline comes in.
I did not know that. Yeah. Wow.
So, and then on top of that, again, and I think this is just interesting because of something we talked about in the last episode on Rocky, is Rocky's wife is the one that comes back to him. Now, it is a different wife than he had when he was making Rocky. But Stallone's wife comes back to him and says, no, you got to do this. This is something, there's something special here, and this is the right play. And obviously, once he does, we get this incredible performance, which is highlighted in the most difficult, aspects that just add something really to the lore of Rocky Balboa, and credit to, and I think you and I will both completely agree, robbed Sylvester Stallone 100% of the Academy Award.
Yep. He should have won.
There's no doubt in our mind, especially over, what did win. And, it's not even a matter of, we thought he should win over another we just head and shoulders above everybody else in that category. And a real credit, I will say, we've talked so much about Michael B. Jordan and everybody else with this, and something that we do have to give so much credit to Stallone for finally making the decision and giving such a really raw performance to this character that needed it in some ways, and really brought this character all the way through. It's a real credit to Stallone for finally making that decision and doing that and giving this role, because that's got to be hard. This is your baby, and at the end of the day, you're being asked to take second, to be second in this movie. You took Rocky Balboa and made him the supporting character.
Yeah. And also, made him someone that's there's a point in this movie, and it's probably the first time you ever really feel this, where you're like, I don't know if I can root for this dude. He's pushing Adonis away, not calling him family. That is harsh to deal with. And I think and again, a credit to Coogler, what Coogler does in the writing here is he makes it hard to deal with, but completely understandable. For all the reasons we've already talked about, he's a ghost of this person. He's gotten invested in Donnie, but he sees in this really tragic way, this illness is his way out. So instead of seeing Donnie as his way forward, he's oh, there's the exit. Okay, well, that's what I'd been kind of hoping for. And then you get this sense of this is a guy who's hoping for death, and it's come, and he feels like it's time, and it's so not time. He's a young man. And I think it's what makes it so hard to see that like breakdown in their relationship, because Adonis, like, he's like, he needs this. And it's not necessarily, and I don't think like Rocky's ever supposed to be, I think it's exactly what he calls him. He calls him Unc. Like, this is an uncle figure. This is a mentor. Like, I need you to be in my life. Like, I'm not asking you to be my father, but I'm asking you to stick around, man. Like, and I think it's what makes this like so hard, because Rocky pushes him away. And then there's just the trajectory of then what happens. This digs up everything then for Donnie, which then gets taken out at the electric factory.
Yes. I think...
I mean, if somebody called me Baby Creed, I'd be pissed too.
And I think with Stallone with this portion is just, I think this is probably what, in the end, he was trying to do with Rocky V.
Yeah.
I think this is what Rocky V should have been, was supposed to be in some ways, that we get this. That obviously just wasn't done to what, to the level that this film is. And I think you're talking about that. It's understandable why Rocky kind of reacts the way he does, even though he's kind of horrible in that moment. Because he unintentionally turns his back, because like we talked about, he was just waiting. Like you said, he was waiting for this moment. Like when he hears that news, it's like, oh, this is what I've been expecting, I've been almost waiting for, so I will see the people I love, but not realizing in that briefest of moments what Donnie has brought to his life, what the spark that Donnie has brought back. He instantly regrets it. Like when he turns and he's just like, why did I say that? Why
it's like such a hard moment too, because it's like that immediate, and I think it's like you get the sense of like, look, like Adrian's cancer battle was during a time that's different than the age in which you're living in, and like you might have more reason to think that and they say like you're gonna have to get treatments, but you're gonna survive this. Like, it's a hopeful outlook. That's the worst part of that. I don't know if I picked it up until this time, how much they're like almost say to him like, no, you're gonna make it, you should make it through this. And it's that they can't be 100%, but like, and I think that's what makes it so hard, because like you understand that like Rocky realizes that so much of his pain and grief comes out at Donnie in this moment, and he definitely doesn't deserve it. And like, then all you can do is try and rebuild that equity, or rebuild that relationship in a way that like, what obviously we end up seeing, but like it causes Donnie to go into the spiral, like, and ruin this like incredible, Bianca's getting to perform at the Electric Factory. And if you're listening to this and you're not from, Eastern PA, like the Electric Factory is a big location, like to go from a club like Johnny Brenda's to the Electric Factory, like that would be a really big moment for an artist. And like, I think the film does a good job explaining that, like, but the guy pushes all the right buttons. He's calling him Baby Creed. And then he says, you will get a VIP passport to your pops.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you looking to die today, sir? Like it's like this, it's the just about the worst thing you could say. And then he beats him up. And I don't know that anyone blames him, but oh man, does it just, I mean, it's like his whole life is just crumbling around him.
Yeah. And again, these bookend moments of what, Coogler does, of starting us out where we see Adonis for the first time, and now he puts him back in this space at this moment. Something we passed over a little bit with the PTI stuff, which I love, and kind of goes back to the 24/7, but something they ask in that moment that I think I'm going to ask right now to you is, from a film standpoint and from the character standpoint. So in that universe and in our reality, did what they, by having, Apollo Creed have his infidelity, does it hurt the legacy of the Apollo Creed person in the movie and us as a character?
No, listen, this is like not me being like, infidelity, wow. Like, it's not like about that. Like, I'm not trying to justify or say that that's right. That's obviously incredibly wrong. Well, I mean, depending on what, like, the particular, like, agreements are within your marriage, but, like,
Michael B. Jordan shows up in your district. It's a game changer.
No. But I don't think it's meant to ruin, like, and I think it's, look, I mean, here's the thing. Is it great that he did that? No, and I'm sure Marianne has to deal with, like, a lot of demons with this, and I think she hints very much at that in the opening of this film. But I don't think it's meant to, because I think it's like, well, what came from that is something so beautiful. So, like, at this point, look, the guy died a very tragic and young death. Do we need to, like, Do we need to drag him through this on top of it and his legacy and his memory? No. Let's just focus on his kid.
He would, though. Like, right? If this happened in real life, that would be Twitter fodder. Like, they would just
be freaking out.
Yes, there would be a lot of that. But I agree with you. And we've seen this. I mean, with Tiger Woods essentially is the closest comparison to this.
Sure.
Like, it doesn't hurt from an athletic standpoint, Tiger Woods' legacy, those types of things. I think I'm glad they address it. I'm glad it's
because
kind of
I think it would be natural.
And then, we move on to it, and we're okay to still love the Apollo Creed character as much as we did prior.
But I also think that's too why it's important that he has that moment, why Donnie has that moment where Bianca gets upset with him for not telling him. And it's on one hand, you could be like, why is this a big deal? It's like, because it is, because your story's different than what you're portraying. You're not some kid on the come up. Like, you are, but you have pedigree. And I think that's like the difference. Like, and I think that's what she's trying to explain to him of like, I just didn't know this aspect of you. And that aspect of you is really important. And obviously becomes like a really important thematic towards the end of the film, intensifying with that like last fight. But I think it's like, this would be a natural conversation to have. I agree with you about like the infidelity and what does that do and does that change anything? And it's like, no, probably not. Like, people make mistakes, but also how much of a mistake do you want to call it? Because you have this great fighter now that people are going to be inspired by. So yeah, it's tough, but it doesn't have to be this like thing that weighs down that character. Going into this kind of like last segment of this, like, and Rocky's fight, separate from Donnie's like training for this pretty Rickley Conlon fight, I really appreciate that Coogler, and now especially knowing the weight of why he did, wove within the training montages Rocky's illness to not gloss over that he is really fighting something, like to not make it like, oh, he's sick, but it's okay, he's getting treatments, it's fine. Like, I think there's a narrative way where you go, let's just get everybody really pumped up for the fight, but Coogler's like, no, like, Rocky has cancer, guys. Like, let's not. And I think all the moments of showing Donnie caring for him makes like a really interesting and I feel like really clever use of like this mentorship that's happening here versus like the need for family that Rocky has too. So I think that's like a really clever thing that's done in like the stretch of this towards building up to the last fight.
Yeah, I mean that whole scene is yeah, in different hands could have been real clunky, and in this it's really smooth and inspirational, and again gives audiences, whether you've been a boxer or not a boxer, just kind of, again, just this transcends the sport, and the film allows everyone to feel some type of understanding of what all these characters are going through.
Well, and unfortunately a relatable story. Unfortunately, it's hard to find someone who hasn't been touched by that disease. Like, so I think it's this very unfortunate thing that I think you can gloss over it, and I think that would have felt false, and Coogler was like, no, I'm going to show it because that's important too here. Like, that's very much a part of this narrative as well. And like, and I think it allows the inspiration of this, like, as we build towards these, like, kind of final montages to feel even more weighted.
I also love that, Rocky brings Bianca into their life just as much. Like, they become a family, the three of them. And just, again, it's reminiscent of Rocky, right? Where all, Adrian, Rocky, Paulie, and Mickey all had their own personal battles and fights, right? And that's what Adonis and, Rocky and Bianca are all having their own personal fights, and what that allows them to do is, be a family together.
Without the toxicity of the first version of this.
Right, yes. Completely.
Without the emotional abuse. But this takes us into this kind of like final montage, and I don't, like, there are so many things to talk about with this. Like, it is the thing that is screen grabbed probably the most from this film. It is the moment that probably you see, as we talked, I mean, listen, I know we said we wouldn't say favorite scenes, but this is a favorite as well. Although in the opening of the AMC Theaters commercial, when Nicole Kidman shows a scene from Creed, she doesn't show this moment, and I think she should have, because I think it would have fit better with the line reading. But there's this sequence of
What's
him.
What's the line reading?
Somehow, even heartbreak feels good at a place like this. But I think there's like just this incredible thing that happens, you know, in this like kind of final run through the streets of Philadelphia. He gets the motorbikes kind of joined together, which Rocky has already explained is an important part of like the neighborhood culture in a positive way. Like he, you know, talks about it like this, you know, this is part of like this area. And then so you get all of them following. Everything slows down, like the entire frame rate slows down. He's in that gray hoodie. Ludwig von Göransson's score is sampling Gonna Fly Now and then mixes with Meek Mill. Holy shit. Like, I get chills just now. It's just because it almost feels like truly, you watch that sequence and you feel like your body levitating out of your seat. Like, what is happening? I'm having like this transcendent experience watching this guy just running through the streets of Philadelphia with this perfect balance of how do we like honor like Bill Conti's score and make it his. And it's just it's that slightest recognition. Obviously Gonna Fly Now becomes even more prominent like during the final fight sequence, but like, oh, so good.
Oh, agreed. Yo, and the choice of using Meek Mill obviously adds the a really resonance to Philadelphia.
Yep.
You know, and then the choice of having, instead of all the kids following in this scenario, you have the bikes and the four-wheelers, which is such a, you know, just the whole thing just comes together. And like you said, just that last run, this uplifting spirit, like, you know, to get to that moment of just like him yelling, like, just goosebumps.
You know, and then, you know, so we get this, and then, you know, and then we got to go overseas.
Do you think that this fight, though, is a little like, if I have anything that I'm gonna go, all right, we're taking a lot of leaps here. You know, I don't think it flows with how Rocky plays out. So I think in the universe it works.
Sure.
But I think in more of a reality, it feels like maybe the only thing that I'm like, we're taking a lot of leaps in this that we get from, you know, the fight that happens at the Wheeler, Conlon that ends that, and then
he's going to jail.
He's going to go to jail, so the only cash grab they can get is to bring this guy that, as far as they know, has one win under his belt and some fights down in Mexico.
You know, maybe it's because I only see hearts in my eyes for Ryan Coogler. I buy it. It all narratively makes sense to me. But I also think this comes back to, we've talked about, like, this movie has to, like, it is performing a lot of functions at the same time. You're right. It is a little contrived that we have to go to Liverpool and he's going to jail. I had to look up why he's going to jail because I know it's like only briefly referenced at some point.
It's
and
guns,
like,
right?
It's gun, yeah. He, like gun possession charges and like it's, you know, whatever. It's like incidental. Just get me to a good boxing match. I don't care like why we're here.
Like that, you know, other than how Conlon, you know, and again, listen, anybody that's watched boxing knows that these guys that are fighting, they've had tough upbringings, and it makes some people rough around the edges. So I do think the fact that you have Conlon, who's kind of got this edge, but also a sweetness to him. Like, we do see him.
Well, because like at the end of the fight,
you know, at the end of the fight, or even with him when he's talking to Tommy Holiday about the decision and, you know, and all of that. And he feels like you could see almost a regret of what he did and why it ended, you know, the fact of this fight, because he has trouble figuring out the levels of his rage, right? Which is like the exact same thing Adonis has a hard time with.
Yeah. And honestly, like, this is the thing. Like, I have a feeling you cannot be a fighter and not kind of be at a 10 at all times.
I can imagine.
So like, because I think you would have to, there was a certain amount of puffing out of the chest where, like, you know, I don't think you can go into that press conference being like, I just hope we come out the best of friends. Like, I was like, you gotta like beat this dude up. Like, you've got to feel oppositional to him. And I think he sets up the opposition of like, you know, I'm really like, and I think like what he doesn't understand is like the nuance to this, but like to Pretty Ricky, he's like, no, I'm actually from like a school of hard knocks. I actually grew up poor. And I don't think like he realizes like, okay, like, you don't know his whole story, though, dude. Yeah. Like, his story's rough,
like,
too.
Like, calls him fake Creed, right?
Calls him fake Creed. Yeah, like, it's rough. And you have that press conference, and
Rocky knows it's coming. Like, Rocky Adonis. Yeah, like, the fight starts right now.
And I like that we see, like, you know, Donnie kind of, like, back in, like, you know, he's got, like, his shirt and tie on. Like, he's taking this seriously. Like, you know, he's showing up to this fight. I don't think like with the like an appropriate level of confidence, but he's not like he doesn't have this fully built persona that like yet where he has to like perform to something. He's fresh and he's new, so he just gets to kind of be himself. You also then very shortly after you get the return of Bianca, which is like the sweetest moment of ever because Rocky is so adorable.
Yeah, it's a good word for it. I'm even going to agree with
sweet.
You. The look back.
He's so doofy.
So much when he opens the door, he just looks at him and he's just like, you too.
It's like he's just like, you guy. Like he almost just like you can just see there's just like just outpouring of love and tenderness there of like because I think he knows how good Bianca is, and I also think it has to be very sweet to kind of see the circle not unbroken. Like this is your Adrian. She's different, but I like she's different in that like I think Adrian would have taken a lot of Rocky's shit because of her abusive brother, but I don't think like Bianca takes any like I think she only comes here because she's come to a place of forgiveness, and obviously Rocky has like reached out and like made the peace, explained
everything that occurred.
Yeah.
Well, because she does listen to Donnie's apology, and like she gives him that moment of tenderness when she realized what happened, but she also wasn't willing to forgive because she also is like, but you need to keep that in check, right?
Yeah, and I think it's just like Rocky clearly respects her so much as his partner. Like, yeah, he makes the kind of women weak in the legs joke, but I think it's more like, no, he respects that she plays an integral part in his life, and I think what's cool about that is that feels like the fruition of what happens at the end of Rocky, where he's yelling out for Adrian because he realizes the most important person in this journey is Adrian, and I think he recognizes the most important asset he has is Bianca. Like, and I think that's like such a beautiful connective moment.
Something that I think Coogler is able to do in this movie that like we talked a little bit, like Rocky isn't it's not necessarily a boxing movie, right? No. Boxing is kind of what Coogler finds this balance, and we talk about this sometimes with different sports. He does, I think, find the balance of this is a sports movie and a human struggle movie, right? And I think he finds that perfect balance with it. And and I think that builds up to where Rocky sees Bianca, like you said. Rocky knows what's important. He's at a point in his life that goes like, no matter what happens in this fight, isn't as important as these two obviously love each other, and they need to be together, right? Yeah. And that's important. That's what he wants to see.
So I'll ask, like, going into this like epic fight, how do you rate the boxing like within this sequence? Do you like how this final sequence is shot? Do you like the pace of it? Does it feel different to you than the other fighting sequences? I think I tried to stake a claim earlier, and I'm just kind of curious if you feel
I do
the difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's some of the best fighting I think that's put on screen. And I say that as somebody that's never obviously boxed, so I can't say that from that standpoint. But I can say it from somebody that's watched boxing a lot, and I can say that I think that it's done really, really well, and I think. His choice of styles of all three different fights is really good. And yeah, I think it puts you into the fight to know exactly what's happening, to feel kind of, what's happening in there. Like you feel the tightness on yourself and the energy of that moment.
Well, I think because there's like what you're describing, that tightness and podcast audience, you can't see like the hand motion he was making is like, there's like a viscery to this sequence that like, there's because like there are points where it like slows down and it's like the jelly getting put on the hand, the splatter, the ice bucket, the spitting of blood, like everything feels so like gory. Like there's a goriness to like how so those moments when it slows down, you're seeing all the little things that are done in the ring. I think there's like a precision and a specificity to that I don't remember in another boxing film that's trying to show all the little like in addition to the boxing, all these little mechanical things that have to happen for the fighter to be prepared for the next round.
Yeah, the first fight we get as the spectator, the second fight we get as the glory, and then this third fight we get as the grittiness, right? Like all of what goes on that we don't see.
That's a good way to delineate it, like what you just said there. Like I think that's like a really nice like kind of break off. Do you think Donnie regrets not having a fire breather?
I mean, it's a dope way to come out, right? Like,
but prior to that, and as we get into these like last sequence talking about the fight, I do one of the like most like the weightiest of costume moments certainly within this film, and like just a little tinge in the heart there. Creed on the front, Johnson on the back.
Yeah. Build your own legacy.
Come on, Mama Marianne.
For the top rope with emotion right there, right? Like I almost get mad at her. I'm like, why would you not give that a couple? Why are you going to hit him with that emotion like 2 minutes before he's got to go out and fight? Like, give those like 3 days earlier, right?
No. Listen, don't we all want that? We want you to cry right before your big moment, you know?
Right. We got the other scene earlier. Now we get the crying scene before you go out. But the decision on the trunks again. Just so the perfection of throughout. And then this is the moment where, right, we get to follow him to the ring. And again, it's that bookend of earlier where he was alone, you know, on his own fighting. And now he's with his, love of his life. He's got Rocky. It's like just following them through. And it's the two of them just, silhouette through, the walk to the ring, I think is really...
Well, and I think there's like a simplicity to like, there's like essentially like he's got music, he's walking, like he's not the hometown hero here. It's not like he's fighting in Philly or like fighting in LA, like, he's overseas, you're in pretty Ricky's town, like, and I think like that's what the nice mark of this is, because his entrance is so simplistic, and then Pretty Ricky, again, like everything slows down and everything goes to black. Almost like you feel like, is there a mistake on the screen? Yeah. And then that burst of fire. And I think like that's, again, it's all of this visceral intention, or this intention to be visceral, I should say, of like in this like last moment. I'm even thinking about like when like when Adonis's eye is swollen shut and the referee comes over and the guy taps him on the neck 4 times. I'm like, first off, you feel that latex on your neck. That is like the sound design with that, and also how like Coogler shoots that is great. But also it's like, oh my God, it's like this reminder of like, no, this is what this actually is.
Right.
Like, we can romanticize this all we would like, but remember what this sport actually is, which is people hitting each other.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think I have in there at some point in my notes, which was like, did the cut man almost get,
Yeah.
Do we need to talk about the, kind of ethics of the of the cut man?
Well, and I also think like this is like, because again, but that's like the other thing is like it makes you, the audience, have to deal with the ethical decisions that are sometimes made in these fights, because Rocky wants to call this pretty early, and I think like the intention of Coogler to keep coming back to Rocky wanting to cut the fight is like really important and feels like obviously weighted in Apollo's death. I think that feels really smart. Bianca's reactions, Marianne's reactions.
Bianca is, I mean, obviously everything Tessa Thompson does is perfection.
Yeah.
But no, Bianca's reaction from like, again, just that character, you understand that character. Like, she unlike Adrian, who sat back in the ring or back in the locker room. In this, Bianca wants to be, and she's in the fight, right? Like, she's cheering, she's pissed,
she's moving,
she's moving,
angry, yeah.
Right? When she thinks, I love the quick moment. Oh my God, I love the moment when Donnie gets hurt and she comes over and she's like, Rock, is he? And he gives her that quick moment of going, he's okay, right?
Yeah.
Just
and the guard's up on her. She's like, I'm cool. I'm cool.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's like, the thing is like, but who like wouldn't do that? Like, I feel like Bianca, though, I'd be rushing towards the ring. Like,
but that's this whole fight sequence. Coogler's so patient and restrained in it too, which is like, you were talking about the ring and the bell and the blood and all of that. Like, we're getting those callbacks of the one punch at a time, one step at a time, one round at a time.
Yes.
Like, all of these, everything comes to fruition, kind of all in this fight.
Well, and all right, so to me, there are 2 gut punch lines in this scene. Which gut punch line would you like?
I'm gonna let you have both.
All right, thank you. This one hurts the most. I'm not a mistake.
I just want to know I'm not a mistake.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Like, oh. Ouch.
Yeah. I know I've seen this movie now, maybe 10 times maybe since it's been out, and every time I'm like you right now, just repeating the line "well off." Yeah, it's
well, and I think it's because it also it demonstrates also a difference for Adonis in the story, because we can reflect this to Apollo, we can reflect this to Rocky, but because there are all these things throughout the film, like the shadow boxing, the the fact that Donnie at one point is wearing a shirt that says "because I can't sing or dance." There are all these references to Rocky, to Apollo, to Rocky, to Apollo, but in this moment he's just Donnie.
Yeah.
Not a mistake.
And that's the thing. I mean, this build up of this entire movie, and we know what this gentleman is going through, the emotional weight. But for him to just put it into words of what everything we've been pointing towards, everything that we have watched and moved towards, for him to put it into words of just, what is it? 7, 7 words? It really just was it so hits you right in the face, of just, wow.
And I would say the lesser of the two, but no less impactful, you taught me to fight again.
Yeah.
What? Come on, Coogler, ease up. I can't take this anymore. It is, I think the thing that I so appreciate, and as we've been talking about this entire episode, is there's not a moment in this film that Coogler doesn't take the opportunity to remind you of the humanity of this story. Get inspired and enjoy the sport and have some fun, but also these are people who they're carrying a lot of weight, and I'm going to remind you of that all throughout the film. They're going to have fun, and you're going to root for them, and you're going to fall in love with them, and you're going to feel blazoned by them to maybe want to go work out. Who knows? But for the most part, I'm going to remind you often of their humanity, and I think that's so important.
Yeah. They're fighting for their burdens, for their legacies, for their lives. I think he puts all that. I mean, and that's what Rocky films are. They're wars in the ring, right? And I think that's what we're getting from, Adonis in this moment. I love... obviously some other decisions that Coogler does and the realism of it, right? We have Michael Buffer. Although, I don't know if Michael Buffer does quite as many boxing, but I think it's a smart choice because, that's who most people would know, and you get that great, and then, obviously I love seeing Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman. And I think they do a terrific job of both the commentary for us through the fight, as well as even Max Kellerman's post-fight stuff. I think, it does really blends well.
Well, yeah, they call him the living embodiment, and then you get pretty Ricky Conlon coming over, and he says, "You're the future of this division," and you get the sense of and I think that is you talked about, that there is this kind of sweetness underneath for that character, and I think it is. It's just such a great, there's so much authenticity. There's this level of verisimilitude that feels like I am watching something I could have watched on HBO. These feel like real fighters. I'm not just Coogler does the he honors mythology but makes it feel super grounded in that way, and I think it could have ended there, and I think this would have felt like a really satisfying film, but then we get that great postscript back in Philadelphia.
I think this is just, the best way that they could have ended this movie, right? I think it comes full circle, and especially at the time, they didn't know whether Creed 2 would happen or anything like that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
We put Rocky in a place of going he has fought, and we see him in a good spot, but it doesn't really, he's not cured by the end or anything like that. So Rocky's ending is still a little open-ended, but we put him in a good place. We put Adonis in a really good place. Just kind of walking those stairs, the choice to end with the steps, in my opinion, are kind of the walk to the stop, again, the one step at a time, it's all about the success, the goals, joining with this internal fight, your self fight, and your, opponent is yourself. And then for them to get to the top and look out over, I know,
that shot of Philadelphia is gorgeous. Well, and I think too, because it's not about triumph, right? This is not Rocky running up the stairs, putting the fist up in the freeze frame. This is a mentorship, a gathering of boxers, a passing of the torch, friends, family, legacy and just kind of like looking out on what these two icons can mean to the city and how they reflect like the fighting spirit of the city in which it's filmed in, like that Coogler, so great.
Yeah, it's, just that thought of like, you can see everything from, just looking out, about both of their futures. It's still wide open.
Let's go to Philly today. Let's do it. I want to go up those steps.
I do want to kind of end here where we talk one more moment about the end of the fight.
Sure.
We have this great ending of it comes down to a split decision again. Adonis has made his mark. The choice to, the crowd chanting Creed.
It's so cool.
That uplifting moment. He's in another country, kind of harkens a little back to Rocky IV, right? But just that beautiful moment of him, he's not a mistake. He's living up to the legacy. But there were 2 endings filmed. There is an ending that was filmed that Adonis wins the fight.
Boo.
So, I guess you believe in the spirit of, the franchise, in the spirit of the character, do you believe that really the outcome is incidental?
Yes.
It wasn't about, whether he won or lost, so by having him lose makes the most sense, right?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I don't feel, and maybe it's because of like, my own personal feelings about this being perfect. I think if he wins, I don't think it dampens the film or depletes the message of the film whatsoever, but to end in a space of like, look, we talked about when we talked about Rocky, like what would it mean for a story that feels triumphant to be about something more than winning? Like, what if triumph is not specifically located to him coming out on top versus him coming to a journey, a reckoning with his legacy, and embracing a family, an appreciation for what his father's spirit can mean to him, what his mother's spirit can mean to him, and like what his life can look like going forward. Like, I don't know, I just feel like that feels like it resonates a little bit deeper because, again, it's like that message to the audience of like, sometimes your successes don't look like wins. That's okay. Right. It's okay for Adonis, and it's okay for you too.
Well, that's the thing, right? Yeah. Success isn't about wins or losses. Nope. Wins or losses are really arbitrary.
Confetti. Like, that's all they are. It's confetti.
Yeah. It's about your own personal journey and success at the end of the day.
Well, I so enjoy talking about this movie with you. Like, I know we are about to round 2 hours, which I don't even know the runtime of the movie. We have maybe gone
2 hours, 2 minutes. Let's see if we can hit it.
We're going to be underneath. So if you are not currently following us on social media, please follow us at How Could You Podcast on Instagram, at How Could You Pod on Twitter, at Facebook.com/How Could You Podcast. You can also check us out on YouTube, YouTube.com/How Could You Podcast. So if you want to listen there instead of from your phone or one of the podcast streaming apps, you can certainly check us out there. We have really exciting things coming up, including our Oscars conversation with Anthony DeSanctis, and I am sure I will get convinced into doing a post-Oscar show immediately after the ceremony is over. Hopefully the subject matter will be about the winners and the losers and not, slapping. But thank you so much for tuning in this week.
And Tessa Thompson, email us. I'll help you, get your resume to the right people at the bank so we can get you working. And, I'm here to train you with whatever you need. So, and I will, until that moment comes, everybody, enjoy the Odyssey.